Welcome. I am Nell Forgas, Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Sudbury, and on behalf of the Leagues of Women Voters of Sudbury, Wayland, and Concord-Carlisle, I am pleased to welcome you to the Candidates Forum for State Representative of the 13th Middlesex Legislative District. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that encourages civic participation. We welcome new members and invite you to visit the website of your local league to find out how to join. We hope that you will vote in the November 5th election, and we have a few election reminders for you. You can register to vote, find your polling place and polling hours, view a sample ballot, track your mail ballot, find a drop box for mail ballots, check early in-person voting locations and hours, and get other election information at www.voteinma.com. The last day to register to vote in the November 5th election is Saturday, October 26th. You can return a paper registration form to your local election office by the close of business or use the online system found at www.voteinma.com until midnight on October 26th. In-person early voting begins on Saturday, October 19th and runs through November 1st. Polling hours and locations will vary by municipality and will include weekend hours. You can find your early voting information at www.voteinma.com. All registered voters are eligible to vote by mail for this election. Mail ballots have been sent to those registered voters who requested them. Once you have received your mail ballot, complete and return it as soon as possible. Make sure to sign the yellow envelope. You can return your mail ballot via U.S. mail or via a secure drop box in your municipality. Ballots may be returned to a drop box until 8 p.m., the close of polls, on Election Day, November 5th. Mail ballots sent via U.S. mail and postmarked by November 5th will be counted if received in your local election office by 5 p.m. on November 8th. If you have not yet received your mail ballot, need to locate a drop box, or want to check the status of your mail ballot, visit www.voteinma.com. And now, on to the forum. The goal of the Candidates Forum is to provide voters with the information they need to make an informed voting decision, focusing on what voters are immediately concerned about in the upcoming election. We offer residents of the district the opportunity to suggest questions for the candidates. This year, we accepted questions via email and US mail. When we receive numerous questions on a topic, we frequently combine them into a single question. Questions asked by the moderator will be addressed to all candidates. We will cover a variety of topics and use as many questions as time allows. We would like to extend our thanks to Lynn Puro and the team at Sudbury TV for making this Candidates Forum possible. We appreciate all that you do for our community. We would also like to express our gratitude to the candidates for their willingness to run for office and to serve our district. Today's forum is for the candidates for state representative for the 13th Middlesex District. The 13th Middlesex District includes all of Sudbury, precincts 1 and 4 in Wayland, precincts 3 and 4 in Concord, precinct 1 in Lincoln, and precincts 1 and 2 in Ward 1, precinct 2A in Ward 2, and precinct 2A in Ward 7 in Marlborough. The role of legislators is to represent the interests of their constituents when considering bills before the legislature. Legislators in Massachusetts are elected every 2 years and serve in the legislature year-round. There are 2 chambers in the Massachusetts legislature, the House of Representatives and the Senate. According to the Massachusetts Legislators website, the Massachusetts House of Representatives is comprised of 160 members, each representing a district of approximately 40,000 people. As required by the Massachusetts Constitution, the House may not adjourn itself for more than 2 days, meeting year-round in either formal or informal session to consider legislation. The Massachusetts House is led by the Speaker of the House, who is elected by the members of the body at the beginning of each 2-year legislative session. The Massachusetts Legislature, known as the General Court, has been meeting since 1630. Legislators of the 193rd General Court considered more than 9,000 bills in the 2-year session that began in January 2023. Legislators have offices and staff to serve their constituents, and they are available to hear and address your concerns. You can find contact information for your legislators at www.malegislature.gov. Our moderator for tonight's forum had a last-minute emergency, and because the candidates are here, we have all agreed that in order to be mindful of their time, that I will step in and moderate tonight's forum. So thank you to both of the candidates for their flexibility, and we apologize for the change of plans. This forum was filmed on Friday, October 11th. Anything that happened after that date will not be reflected in the forum. This is the candidates forum for state representative for the 13th Middlesex Legislative District. There are 2 candidates for 1 seat. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. The same questions will be asked of each candidate in alternating order. Each candidate in turn will have an opportunity to provide a 90-second response to each question. If I feel that a rebuttal is warranted or that there is more to say on the topic, I will allow 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Candidates may also request a rebuttal. In addition to the long answer questions, there will be a short lightning round of 5 yes or no questions halfway through the forum. Candidates should not interrupt each other, and no personal references will be allowed. Both candidates have agreed to the ground rules. We will now begin with the candidates' 2-minute opening statements. The candidates have flipped a coin, and Mrs. Gardner will go first. Mrs. Gardner, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the Sudbury TV, to the League of Women Voters, and to Mr. Gentile for agreeing to do this. My name is Virginia Gardner, and along with my husband, George, we moved to Wayland 6 years ago. We were getting ready to retire. We wanted to be closer to our grandchildren, our 4 grandchildren, and we wanted to be available to help them. And we have loved every minute of it. As soon as I moved here, I refocused and got involved, joining WayCam, where they accepted my show, registered to vote, joined Wayland Republican Town Committee, and was named a registrar for a short time, then was elected chair of the Wayland Republican Town Committee. I do a variety of shows, from authors to community shows, emergency preparedness, health issues, seniors, moms issues, and I use the platform to help inform the community. We've also organized 6 police appreciation days. Every year, they're January 6th, and we have welcomed and had the Wayland Democratic Town Committee join us as well. I'm also very proud of the Autism Awareness Seatbelt Sleeve. It is privately funded and used in Newton, Wayland, and Weston, and soon, hopefully, Sudbury. I have a 24-year history of volunteering, helping veterans in both their financial and emotional support. It has been one of the most important things I do. As part of helping veterans, I'm a member of the American Legion Auxiliary, and as part of the auxiliary, I've been voted chaplain twice, 2 terms. During this retirement, I was also appointed president of the Italian American Alliance National Chapter, where I get to talk to and establish chapters of the IAA countrywide. My Italian American organization is not exclusive to just Italian people. We welcome and support everybody. I learned firsthand how listening is learning, and as part of my 11 years in broadcasting, my own show, I have explored such issues as aging, working moms, exercise, religion, finances, and now in retirement, staying active on every level. To know more about me, please visit my Facebook page, Gardner for State Rep, or in webpage Virginia Gardner at forstateforrep.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, you have 2 minutes as well.
Hello, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate, and to my opponent, Virginia Gardner, for being here tonight. My name is Carmen Gentile. I've been a Sudbury resident for over 40 years, where my wife Linda and I have raised 2 kids, one of whom now lives in Wayland with her family. I've represented Sudbury, Wayland, and Marlborough on Beacon Hill for the last 10 years. For the last 2, I've had the great honor to get to know and represent constituents in Lincoln and Concord as well. Making sure that our district remains a wonderful place for children like mine to grow up has guided all my decisions at the State House. I've worked hard to be present, transparent, and accessible to all residents in my district, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. I attend as many events as possible, host regular office hours, and assist constituents on a daily basis. I'm proud of my record. I've fought year after year for increases to education spending because it's the best investment we can make. In the last 10 years, Chapter 70 funding to our public schools has increased 67%. We know kids cannot excel when they're hungry, which is why I also voted to make universal free school meals permanent. My priorities in the upcoming session include the fight against climate change, including stopping the expansion of Hanscom Airfield, protecting our seniors, including through bills I've sponsored that would help to alleviate the workforce crisis in home care and reduce the property tax burden on seniors, and debt-free public higher ed, which I've been a fierce advocate for. As the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Higher Education, I was proud that the legislature made community college tuition free this year. I look forward to a discussion on the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, I'm going to ask some questions, alternating who goes first. Each candidate in turn will have an opportunity to provide a 90-second response to every question. First question is, if elected, what would be your top 3 priorities as state representative for your district? Mr. Gentile, we'll begin with you. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you, Nell. So my 3 priorities are always constituent services, the budget, and legislation. Constituent services, people call up, they're having their electricity turned off, they have a problem with the register of motor vehicles, they're getting evicted. It's very satisfying to be able to assist folks. We just passed a $5 billion bill for housing, and Sudbury, Concord, Lincoln, Wayland, Marlborough all should get their fair share of those monies to rehabilitate existing public housing and to build more housing, market rate housing and other housing. I'm looking forward to filing legislation in the next session, refiling some of the legislation that I've filed previously that hasn't made it over the finish line yet, and looking forward to it. So I thank you very much and look forward to the rest of the evening.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, same question. Your top 3 priorities as state representative for your district.
Well, my first one would be veterans. I strongly feel that no veteran should be hungry or homeless and should have all services available to them and a roof over their head. I've seen firsthand what happens with veterans when they are homeless. Each year, we do probably 4 times a year programs with homeless veterans. So, Christmas morning is one of the most important times for us. We go into the Court Street homeless shelter and bring them gift cards and sing Christmas carols. And they enjoy it so much, even my singing. When I see them in the summer for those events, they recognize me, and I feel like I'm not the Christmas carol singer. I'm horrible. But anyhow, that's veterans. Also, the drug problem. We have a terrible drug problem in this state and development. And I think we need to start looking at our development we know what we have to do, but I think sometimes putting time limits and state rules on communities is not always a good move. Thank you.
Thank you. We received the most questions about housing. So Mrs. Gardner, this question will go to you first. What legislation would you support to mitigate the high cost and shortage of housing in the Commonwealth? Mrs. Gardner, you have 90 seconds.
You know, this is one of those difficult questions. And honestly, I look at development and sometimes I think, who benefits from this? We love to say the people that come into it, of course, but sometimes the developments that are being put into our neighborhoods is ready to welcome 1,200 people. And I'm not sure a rush to develop that size of a property, of a development, is the right way to go. I think we have to look at the long range impact of that, whether it's how it affects our schools by enrollment, how it affects our roads, our police. The enrollment in school will go way up. In Wayland, we have to get well water. So we need to look at all of those things. And I think sometimes a 1 year out, 2 year out, 3 or 5 year out is a better way to go. I'd really like to see state involvement and guidance, but ultimately I would like the city and town to be responsible and make those choices of what works best for their community. Development is here, it's going to be, but again, I think that we need to have smart development with insight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, same question. What legislation would you support to mitigate the high cost and shortage of housing in the Commonwealth? You have 90 seconds.
Well, this past year, I worked 5-10 hours a week on the housing bond bill that the House passed, the Senate passed, and the governor signed. That's $5 billion for housing in the Commonwealth. That's 3 times the size of the bond bill that we did 5 years ago. So what does that mean? So that means that all of the 43,000 public housing units in the Commonwealth will be able to be rehabilitated. For example, in Sudbury, they had 20 years ago, they put in through the wall heat pumps. 18 of them had failed as of a couple of years ago. I think the other 2 are probably failed by now. So those will be able to be replaced. And we have a pilot program that I was one of the folks fighting for. It's called social housing. It's a remarkable public-private partnership program where local towns like Sudbury or Lincoln or Concord could partner with a private developer to put together housing. And most of it would be market rate, but there'd also be affordable. There'd be some low income. It would be a mix. So I'm also the chair of the Sudbury Housing Trust, engaged all the time in helping people with affordable housing, owner-occupied affordable housing. So I'm all in on housing, and I'm looking forward to rolling out the funding that we've appropriated this past year. Thank you.
Thank you. Last fiscal year, Massachusetts spent $1 billion providing short-term services to migrants. What should the legislature do to respond to the increase in immigration to Massachusetts? Mr. Gentile, this question goes to you first. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. So that $1 billion was not anticipated because we didn't anticipate that we'd be getting so many migrants coming into Massachusetts. However, we covered it. And Governor Healy very wisely capped it at 7,500 families, which is over 20,000 people, because we don't have the physical capacity for more. I want to point out that of the 7,500 families that we're housing now in shelters, fully half of them are Massachusetts families that have been here for years. And the other half are folks who came in, who migrated into the United States. And of those people that migrated in, that are in shelters now, each one of them is legally present in the Commonwealth. People that came across the border illegally, without papers, they're not being sheltered today. So, you know, it's a partnership with the federal government. The federal government has to really decrease the number of people coming in. President Biden tried to do that, and Mr. Trump prevailed upon Republican majority to not allow that to go through. So, looking forward to working on this in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, same question about providing short-term services to migrants. What should the legislature do to respond to the increase in immigration to Massachusetts? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Short-term is never short-term because we have to look at this year. We have to look at next year, 5 years out. Again, we have to have the vision to see it's not just today, it's tomorrow, and it's next year and 5 years down the road. Again, when migrants come here, we are housing them. I'm unclear why we have half. I think I'm not sure I'm with that figure, but at any rate, I honestly don't think any migrant should be housed here before veterans. Every veteran should be off the streets, being warm in the winter, being cool in the summer. They should be off the street and not sleeping on grates before we offer anyone our hospitality. I'm in favor of a moratorium. First of all, housing Massachusetts people, Massachusetts residents, is part of a bill that was in 1982 by Governor Dukakis, and rightly so. You had to be a resident of Massachusetts for a year, and then you were able to get housing if you were evicted from your home. I'd like to see a little bit more control. I'd like to see a moratorium till we can get this under control so that we can decide what to do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Massachusetts is one of the only full-time legislatures in the country. It is also one of the least productive in terms of legislation passed. What changes, if any, would you make in the way that the legislature operates? Mrs. Gardner, this question goes to you first. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I'm not sure what changes I would make, except that I know that right now we're looking at a little bit more transparency. Some of the bills that are passed, I think that they need to be explained a little bit better. When they come back, voted on, I'd like to see a better way to have them printed so that we can find them, so that the bill doesn't change names 5 times till the final vote. I think that's very frustrating for citizens to try and understand where the bill went, how it was voted on, how it changed. Sometimes I feel, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, that I'm reading these bills and it sounds like what my doctor writes on Patient Gateway when I've just had an x-ray. And then finally I get the simple, plain English of I'm not going to need another knee replacement kind of thing. So I kind of wish that the first thing I would do is maybe make that a little bit more friendlier to people trying to track bills and understand what the bill is. So that maybe that's the answer to the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, same question. What changes, if any, would you make in the way the legislature operates?
Well, thank you very much. You know, so let me respond. I don't accept the predicate of your question. You know, we had a governor's race not too long ago, and one of the unsuccessful candidates for the Democratic nomination was Danielle Allen, a college professor at Harvard University. You know, after that was over, she came to see me and we sat down for 45 minutes in my office, and she said something that you just said, which was Massachusetts is the least productive legislature in the country, least effective. And I said, well, why do you say that? And she said, well, because if you look at the number of bills that are filed and the in the numerator, and then you put the number of bills that are actually passed, and it's so low. The fraction is so low. And I said, well, actually, we have like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9,000 bills filed. I could file 500 bills myself. It doesn't mean that we have 500 good bills. So what you have to look at is what actually comes out. And what actually comes out from our legislature is very productive. This current session may not have been the most productive session in the last 10 years, but it has been very productive. So other states look to us. They look to us for legislation. We're an example for other states. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. What actions, if any, should the legislature take to address climate change? Mr. Gentile, you have 90 seconds.
We need to really completely overhaul the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure in the Commonwealth. What do I mean by that? I mean, we need to probably build 60 or 70 new substations to handle all the electricity that we will be able to produce offshore. It's estimated that we can produce fully 1/3, if not 1/2, of all the wind power that the Biden administration had forecast that the country could create, because we have the Saudi Arabia of wind off of our south coast. So I'm looking forward to seeing an energy bill come to the floor and be voted on in a day of formal session between now and Thanksgiving, because we need it to happen and we can do it. And that would be coming along with the economic development bill, which I expect and believe will also be going back into formal session to vote. There's a lot we can do and that we will do to gas, the gas, any new gas, if there are new subdivisions that need gas heat, instead of just putting gas in them, we need to allow bidding to go out to companies that can do thermal energy rather than gas. And there's a lot we can do, and we know we can do it, and we need to push ahead on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, same question. What actions, if any, should the legislature take to address climate change? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, I think we all agree that climate change is happening, whether it's what it's caused by, whether it's man, whether it's all of these pollution. I think we could argue that point. However, it is here, it's happening, weather is changing. Again, with climate change, I kind of feel like we are being pushed into these electric cars and not being able to have a choice necessarily about being able to drive a gas automobile. I feel like the deadline, I think it's 2035 or 2050. I'd like to look at alternative energy. I think combining wind, not my favorite wind, but in solar, I have solar panels, using all the assets available to us, because I don't think we can get rid of one right off. I think we have to look at all of them and think of a way to use all of them for the best interest of our taxpayers, our residents, and our country. But I do think pushing us into using, battery operated cars is not something I would approve of. And I think there's all kinds of options that we should look at.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, would you like a rebuttal?
I would. Thank you very much. So
30 seconds.
7 or 8 days ago, I got a new car. It's a hybrid plug-in, so it can go 39 miles on electricity before it turns over to gas. I drive 15 to 18,000 miles a year. So in the last 8 days, I've driven a few hundred miles, and it's all been electric other than 4 miles. When I went to the State House the other day and came back, 4 miles had to be used for gasoline, and so now, and the rest was taken care of for electricity. Electricity costs a third the cost of gasoline. So I can go 10 miles. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, would you like 30 seconds?
Yes, I would. I'm not saying electricity is bad. I'm just saying a choice. I'd like to have a choice. I certainly personally would not drive an electric car. I don't like presently how they extract the lithium. It's child labor, and that's who's responsible for getting the lithium to our electric cars. So I personally would not drive one for that reason. But again, it comes down to choices. We're all adults, and we should be able to make choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. With increasing evidence of the harms of social media to minors, should the legislature play a role in making social media safer for kids? Mrs. Gardner, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. You know, not just safer for kids, but how about seniors? Do you know seniors are part of the majority of people that get caught in these crazy traps on Facebook and other social medias? They scam elderly people. And I know that you all have been on Facebook, and with all due respect, Mr. Gentile, they go to female people that look like they may be elderly, and they try getting money from them. Social media is a cesspool. I'm not sure how we address it, but it certainly warrants a parents group, psychologists, educators. A whole group of people need to address this problem. It goes from bullying to emotional stress. This is a huge problem, and I thank you for whoever asked that question. We need to be more aware of the dangers of social media. It starts by bullying and ends up with some children committing suicide. This is a horrible cesspool that we have gotten ourselves into, and it needs to be studied, and it needs to be studied now.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, same question. You have 90
Well,
seconds.
thank you very much. So this is an area where Mrs. Gardner and I very closely agree. You know, we really need both the federal and the state government. We need to legislate to control, to do whatever we can to just rid ourselves of the content that is harming teenagers and especially girls and also seniors. You know, one of my constituents, a friend, was taken advantage of recently financially, and you know, but you know that as Ms. Gardner pointed out, you know, young people get bullied, and sometimes it results in suicidal ideation and actual suicides, and other times it can be Great Depression. So this is something that we need to address legislatively, to just stop it, make it criminal, make this stuff criminal, and just to get people away from this. The Boy Scouts of America have a bullying program. All the adults leaders have to learn this, and it's very useful. And I think all of our teachers and just throughout society, we should really be focusing on bullying and how to stop it and how to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Many municipalities, including Sudbury and Wayland, have had to spend considerable amounts of money to remediate a PFAS contaminated water supply. What steps should the legislature take, if any, to deal with environmental contamination from PFAS forever chemicals? Mr. Gentile, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. So several months ago, well, actually more than several months ago, there was a commission put together. The Speaker Pro Tem, Representative Kate Hogan from Stowe, led that commission on PFAS. And she's, you know, her group has put together a bill which has not gone through the legislature as of yet. I'm looking forward to that bill getting through sooner rather than later. You know, we need to stop the PFAS from coming in. So recently, just more than 2 months ago, we passed legislation to stop to prohibit PFAS in the firefighter uniforms. And we really need to legislate it out of being sold. I mean, we buy raincoats and other things, cookware, you know, it all has PFAS in it. We just need to legislate it away. So just the way we got rid of DDT and PCBs, we need to legislate the use of this away. And in the meantime, or at the same time, we need to filter our waters, obviously, so that we're not consuming this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, same question. You have 90 seconds.
When we came here to Wayland 6 years ago, I thought well water was going to be wonderful. Almost within 16 months, I found myself having to pick up bottled water from the landfill and not be able to use our water. It is disturbing. And again, this is one of those things we look at and say, let's do this. It's wonderful to use. And then we find out that it's causing cancer. It's dangerous. It should not be used. It should not be used in clothing. It should not be used on soccer fields. Yeah, we have to do something about it. And this is a problem. I think the state will ultimately have to step in. I know here in Wayland, we have encouraged, and I think I voted at annual meeting to tap into the MWRA water supply. That is key. And I go back to the development a little bit with this. If we have water that is contaminated with this, and it is, we need to think about how many people we invite in and how many more people are going to use the water. So again, this has to be solved. It's one of those things that I think we need to look into, and the state absolutely needs to be part of it. We can't do it by one town. We have to have the state's cooperation and regional cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. It is time for the lightning round. Please answer yes or no to the following 5 questions, and I will give you a brief moment to mute and unmute. The first question, and this one will go to Mrs. Gardner first. Yes or no, do you support Election Day voter registration? Mrs. Gardner.
No.
Mr. Gentile.
Yes, I filed legislation to do just that.
Thank you. Next question, yes or no? Does Massachusetts need a new state seal and flag? Mr. Gentile, yes or no?
Yes, we do.
Mrs. Gardner.
No.
Yes or no? Should public meetings subject to the open meeting law be required to offer an option for the public to observe and participate in the meeting remotely? Mrs. Gardner.
Yes.
Mr. Gentile.
Yes.
Yes or no? Do you support legislation to require age-appropriate, medically accurate sex education in public schools? Mr. Gentile.
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner.
Yes.
Yes or no? How will you vote on ballot question 2, which would eliminate the requirement that students pass the MCAS exam to graduate from high school? Mrs. Gardner.
It's yes or no. So
You can undecided.
no, I'm not undecided. I think they have to pass the exam to graduate. It's
So no.
detail later.
Mr. Gentile.
I'll vote yes to get rid of MCAS. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was the end of the lightning round. The next question. In the wake of Roe being overturned, abortion laws are being left to the states. Do you support continuing Massachusetts' current abortion laws? And are there any changes needed? Mr. Gentile, you have 90 seconds.
Yes, I support Massachusetts' current abortion laws. I advocated for passage of the so-called Roe Act. My opponent had written to me as a constituent telling me that she was in opposition to that. I favor, a woman's right to choose. the legislature has no part in being between a doctor and a pregnant person. And women have a right to choose what they do with their own bodies and protect themselves. And we've passed legislation since Roe was overturned, and we may need to pass further legislation, but right now we're a protected place. In fact, we just passed a bill a month ago so that these cell phone companies can't be selling data that shows if a woman came to an abortion clinic in Massachusetts, because the states where it's illegal, they're using that data to harass and go after women that come here for abortions. So we passed that legislation to protect people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, same question. You have 90 seconds.
Well, as Carmine said on, I think, Cloak Red radio station, this law is behind us. We live in a Democratic state. We have a Democratic governor, Democratic legislature. I think there's only 30, possibly 28 Republicans. It's not going to be overturned. It is the law. The law is here. But the part that I disagreed with when I called Mr. Gentile is this piece of it. It is the infanticide piece of it. And I hesitate to get into the details of it, but I have to. Infanticide is when a botched abortion of a full-term child, the baby is left to die unattended, and they now will give it a drug to stop its heart, similar to what you do when you put your pet down. But that was the piece I objected to. And by the way, the legislature agreed with me. They took that piece out of it. So it passed, but not with the infanticide piece of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
You can have 30 seconds.
Thank you. So never, I mean, never, I mean, no significant number of legislators ever considered making it legal for such a horror to occur. It's absurd. It's just something, it's like this rumor about this lie about people in Ohio, the migrants, eating people's cats and dogs. I mean, it's just mischievous nonsense. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, would you like 30 seconds?
I would. It's not absurd. The parishes talked about it. Our priests talked about it. Everyone talked about infanticide. Maybe it was some kind of rumor started to get people up in arms. I don't know. I found that politics these days is, it seems to be mud throwing. It is happening in 7 states. It is not a rumor. It is not a lie. It is the truth. And hearing of it, as a citizen, I did not want that on the abortion bill. I am not in favor of infanticide, and it is real in 7 states, and it exists.
Okay. Next question. Should Massachusetts have a so-called death with dignity law, allowing terminally ill, mentally capable adults access to medical aid in dying? Mrs. Gardner, you have 90 seconds.
I'm gonna be honest, I have not heard a lot about this. I would have to study this a lot more before I could give a definitive answer. I need a lot more information about this. The obvious is in their right mind. There's lots of pieces to this, and I am just not in a position to comment on this particular legislation right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, you have 90 seconds.
So 10 years ago, when I went into the legislature, I looked at the Oregon and Washington State had both enacted similar legislation, and it had been in force for a number of years. I looked at the figures of the numbers of people that went through did the paperwork to be able to have death with dignity, choose the passing. And about half the people, a little less than half the people that did all the paperwork actually, used it. I'm very much in favor of it. It would only apply to people who, mentally competent and dying. I mean, they're terminally ill, and this would be very helpful for people who are suffering and whose quality of life is at a point where they would choose rather to leave with some dignity rather than to continue to suffer and have their family members observe them suffering. So I've co-sponsored this legislation now for 5 sessions, and I'll continue to push to have it become law. They do it in Vermont now also, so people go up to Vermont for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Should the legislature regulate private equity funding of healthcare institutions to prevent another situation like Steward Healthcare? Mr. Gentile, you have 90 seconds.
Absolutely. No question about it. We have a for-profit company that owns Metro West Medical Center. Had a law office 2 blocks away from them for about 40 years, or not 40 years, 30 years. And in one 5-year period, they went through 6 CEOs. It's just, for-profit hospitals are a horror story, and we need to just eliminate them. If you're going to have a hospital, it needs to be a nonprofit. We need to be, with medicine, we're there to help people, to care for people, not to be greedy, not to make a buck. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, you have 90 seconds.
Can you ask the question again, please?
Absolutely. Should the legislature regulate private equity funding of healthcare institutions to prevent another situation like Steward Healthcare?
Absolutely. I think we have to. I think the people in those towns and cities and towns are now left hanging. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Yes.
Thank you. Next question. What are your priorities for public transportation in the 13th Middlesex district? Mrs. Gardner, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I've been watching the development at the end of where we turn in for the landfill, and I see the bus stop to nowhere. They are working on sidewalks so that hopefully at some point there will be public transportation. But I think in order for this to work, we have to have a regional sort of all groups, all cities and towns, whether in the 13th Middlesex and beyond, involved in this. We can't just say, okay, Wayland, get on a bus to nowhere. Every one of Wayland, Sudbury, Lincoln, Concord, and Marlborough have to be involved with this. So I think it's a priority, obviously, if we're going to have housing on any level. And lots of times the housing comes with not parking spaces available for cars. So I think we have to meet with other cities and towns and combine an effort to see where we're going with this and how it's going to work. I think right now people are struggling with where is this going and where are we going with it? So I'd like to see sort of the 13th Middlesex district working together to find what we're doing with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, same question. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. So there are 14 regional transit authorities in the Commonwealth, and then you have the MBTA for Boston. Here in the 13th Middlesex District, we have the Metro West Transit Authority, which we've increased funding to them so that now they operate buses, and the buses are free now. Imagine that, free bus rides. But the Transit Authority doesn't extend into Sudbury So we really need to have the regional transit authorities extend their services so that every city and town is covered and covered well. So in Sudbury, we have a program called Go Sudbury, which I was able to get state funding for, which allowed people to take Uber or taxi rides to appointments, what have you. But really, the regional transit authorities, 10 years ago, when we had that horrible, period of half a dozen snowstorms and everything stopped, the MBTA stopped, the train stopped. I mean, there was no transportation. The Metro West Transit Authority kept running all the time. So we need to extend their service throughout the 13th Middlesex district so that people have much better public transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Should Massachusetts consider offering vouchers so parents can choose whether their child attends a public or private school? Mr. Gentile, you have 90 seconds.
No, the state, we have public schools. Public schools in America started in Massachusetts. And we had the first free public elementary schools. We went to free high school. We just, in the last couple of months, went to free community college. Repeat the question again.
Certainly. Should Massachusetts consider offering vouchers so parents can choose whether their child attends?
No, we shouldn't, because we're in the business of providing public education, not private education, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, same question. Should Massachusetts consider offering vouchers so parents can choose whether their child attends a public or private school? You have 90 seconds.
Yes, I think they should consider it. I think it has to be tried. I think there's some schools that are not doing as well as other schools. I think that the parents and the children need an opportunity to excel, and sometimes transferring out of a school is the way to do it. Yeah, I think we should. I think it should at least be explored, at least a pilot program, and be explored rather than just saying no. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, would you like to speak? No.
No, that's not sorry.
Thank you. All right. Last question. What is your position on H2989/S1976, an act establishing Indigenous Peoples Day? This bill would repeal the law designating the second Monday in October as Columbus Day and designate it instead as Indigenous Peoples Day. Mrs. Gardner, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you for asking this question. Well, I am, as I said, I am national chapter of the Italian American Alliance president, and I have to announce this. It's called NIAG, Native American Guardian Association, has reached out to us and are partnering with us. They support Columbus and Columbus Day, and we support them. The reason being is we don't dislike Indigenous people. We get such a bad rap. We don't dislike them. We are on their side too. But here's the thing. They would like their day, and rightly so, and we would like Columbus Day, and rightly so. We harbor no ill will. We just want to be able to celebrate our heritage. October is Italian Heritage Month. I was just at the State House. We celebrated Italian Heritage Month. But I really think that, unfortunately, and I'm going to say this quickly, the books that have been written to condemn Columbus by Howard Zinn. He wrote his own book, he checked himself, and they have been debunked by 5 authors. Rafael Ortiz, Mary Grabar, I can't even, I'm so with this question, but they have been debunked. This is not true, and it's time we put that false history aside, and we absolutely welcome Columbus Day and Indigenous People Day. We support it. I'm a member of NIAG now, North American Guardian Association for Native Americans, the Native American group. I'm a member. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gentile, same questions. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thanks very much. So I am 100% Italian American. All four of my grandparents came from Italy. I've been back to Italy a couple of times. We have a homestead there that's over 400 years old. I'm proud of my Italian heritage, and I belong to two Italian American associations in the area here. However, you know, I've discovered that the world is not flat, that we live in it's a spherical, and I disagree with Mrs. Gardner insofar as I believe that Christopher Columbus was a slaver, a killer, a murderer, just a really despicable person. Sort of like years ago, I used to think, well, Bill Cosby, great guy. Really, you know, he wrote a book on fatherhood. It was really funny. It was kind of neat. Then we find out he's a sexual predator. He's a rapist. So, you know, Columbus, there are plenty of Italians that I'm very proud of. And, you know, on the one hand, you know, Italian Americans look at Columbus and they say, well, you know, this is for us. This is celebrating being an Italian American, Columbus. But, you know, we can celebrate it otherwise. And so I have voted 5 times now in committee for Indigenous Peoples Day, and I voted again for it just in the last few months. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, you can have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Again, this has been debunked, but the reason why we have Columbus Day is, and I'm 100%, I am second generation Italian American. And the reason we have it is because in New Orleans, Louisiana, 11 Italians, Sicilians, were hung for a crime they did not commit. They were proven innocent, and the government of Louisiana decided to hang them in an attempt to have the Italian country not come over here and declare war. I believe with the Native Americans, they named Columbus Day. Those horrible atrocities have been debunked by many authors. And again, I'm proud of my 100% second generation. I will defend my heritage. Should we have it? Yes. I stand by that. And the Indigenous people needs their day. They did some atrocities too.
Thank you.
They did atrocities too. We celebrate our heritage.
I need to give Mr. Gentile 30 seconds, but we can have another round of rebuttals if needed. Mr. Gentile, would you like 30 seconds?
I would. Thank you so much. And I agree that 11 Italian Americans were lynched in New Orleans many years ago. And of course, that's just a fraction of the thousands and thousands of Blacks that have been lynched in the United States since before the Civil War and after the Civil War and really into the 20th century. So, for example, I remember, well, so I'll just say that it's a shame, you know, it's horrible what happened to those Italian Americans in Louisiana, but I met a woman whose grandmother was a slave in the Caribbean.
I need to give Mrs. Gardner an opportunity. We'll go another round of rebuttals here. So Mrs. Gardner, you have 30 seconds.
Well, again, of course, we support Black people, and we mourn and are absolutely horrified by crimes. Of course we are. But again, we are talking about atrocities that never happened here. Columbus never landed in the United States. He never landed here. We're talking about something that has been debunked, and I am proud of my Italian heritage. I'll support Columbus. It's been debunked, and anyone, every culture is welcome in the Italian American Alliance. We have Black members, we have Indigenous people, we have Jews, we have Christians. Everyone is welcome. The reason is we respect every heritage, every celebration that someone may have. And you know what? you can look back generations. No, everyone is guilty. Everyone is innocent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gentile, I'll give you a final 30 seconds if you'd like it. Okay, thank you both. So this concludes our questions for today. Thank you both. You will have 1 minute for your closing statement, and Mr. Gentile, you will go first. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you very much. The lifeblood of democracy is civic participation and debate. So thank you again to the League of Women Voters and Virginia. For the last 10 years, I've fought hard for good schools, better infrastructure, higher quality public transit, debt-free public higher education, immediate action to stop climate change, and generous benefits for seniors and veterans. In the last 4 years, I've brought in nearly $14 million in earmarks for the district for causes such as the Sudbury, Lincoln, and Marlborough food pantries. I was proud to vote for the Roe Act to make sure that the right to choose was protected in Massachusetts, as well as police reform to make sure that our law enforcement remains accountable and equitable. It's been the honor of my lifetime to be your state rep. Re-elect me, and I pledge to continue to be transparent, responsive, and fight for you and your family. Thank you, and I hope I can count on your vote on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Gardner, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Gentile, for a very respectful but spirited debate. Thank you. And thank you, Sudbury, again. Thank you for this opportunity to learn more about me. I have a long history of successful activism, from returning the environment, brownfields, and contaminated land into solar farms and passive recreation, to development and putting properties back on the tax roll, to helping seniors with tax breaks and fundamental living conditions. The last project that I'm very proud of is the Autism Awareness Seatbelt, which has been a huge success, privately funded, and working with veterans and continue to be my priority. I firmly believe if you accept the responsibility of finding a solution to a problem, you don't allow doors to be slammed or closed in your face. You find another way and you find a solution. And I will bring that same belief to the State House. I ask you for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you to our candidates. Again, the Leagues of Women Voters of Sudbury, Wayland, and Concord Carlisle wish to thank Sudbury TV, the candidates, and our moderator, without whom this program would not have been possible. If your question was not asked today, we encourage you to reach out to the candidates directly with your questions. You can find their contact information on vote411.org. We remind you again that the last day to register to vote in the November 5th election is Saturday, October 26th. In-person early voting begins on Saturday, October 19th and runs through November 1st. Polling hours and locations for in-person early voting will vary by municipality and will include weekend hours. You can find the in-person early voting schedule for your polling place at www.voteinma.com. If you have requested a mail ballot, complete your ballot as soon as possible and return it via U.S. mail or via one of the secure drop boxes available in your municipality. Be sure to sign the yellow envelope. Mail ballots must be in a drop box by 8 p.m. on Election Day, November 5th, or postmarked by November 5th and received by the local election office by 5 p.m. November 8th. You can find a local drop box or check the status of your mail ballot at www.voteinma.com. And most importantly, we remind you to vote in the election on Tuesday, November 5th. Polls will be open for in-person voting from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you think that events like the Candidates Forum are important, please join your local League of Women Voters. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. Your vote is your voice. Thank you for watching.